First week of April here in northwestern Vermont. Sugaring season is coming to an end, but I wanted to make a quick step-by-step video for anyone that's interested or anyone that's thinking about starting. So a brief history, I'd never been to a sugar house before last year. I went to my buddy Sam's and came home and built the one behind me 3 days later with my buddy Mark. It's nothing fancy, and I'm still gonna make improvements going forward. But yeah, this is only my second season, so everything I've learned has been through either online research or reading, or mostly from experience in my first season. I started with 10 taps last year and moved up to 24 this year, and it's just kind of taken off as an obsession. So, first, I guess we're gonna go through all of the steps, and hopefully you can take something away from it. First step's gonna be collecting sap, so let's get started. Alright, this is the fun part of my job. It looks like a tree fell across the road. We had a pretty severe windstorm last night. So I'm gonna go ahead and take care of that and keep on trucking. So I made it to the first bucket. I've got 12 buckets total, 24 taps. Each tree is double tapped. Typically, you want to make sure the tree's big enough to handle two. I like to think if it's bigger around than the bucket, then it should be okay, because I'm using the smaller diameter tree saver taps. And I just have a 7/16 tube going into the bucket. It seals out any bugs, dirt, tree bark, rain, etc. So let's see what we've got. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's about a half of a pail. It's been about 2 days, so not as much as I was hoping for, but this tree's been a slow producer this year, so it may not have started completely. But we're gonna have a warm up in the next couple of days, so should be getting a little bit more than that. So I want to show you something. Got down below freezing last night, so we had some ice form. I've tested it before, and there's less than 0.5% of sugar in the ice water that I'm pulling. So it's not really worth boiling down. Typically what we see is around 2% for sugar maples around here. And that's a 40-to-1 ratio. So you have to boil off 40 gallons of sap to make a gallon of syrup. Or I think it's actually 43 gallons, but regardless, I don't like to burn more fuel than I need to. So anytime I have ice, unless it's a frozen solid bucket, I'm gonna pull it. So I just pulled this bucket and it was full, and I can see why. It's about 40 degrees and sunny, and this tree's kind of out in the open, so it gets a lot of sun, but the sap is definitely flowing pretty good on it today. So I wanted to give you an idea of what the woods look like that I'm tapping. So it's pretty much all hardwoods, mostly maple. There's definitely a potential to grow. I wanted to give a shout out to my neighbor Eric, who's letting me tap his trees. We just do a little bit of bartering, and it works out. But yeah, definitely the potential for some more taps in the future. I left out one of the most important topics, which is tapping. Obviously I've already tapped the tree, so I can't show you, but I'll give you a quick description. So you're gonna want to get the proper drill bit for the tap and drill it in about 1.5 to 2 inches. And when you tap it, you're gonna tap the spile in, and once you hear it change sounds, you're gonna stop, because if you go too hard, it'll crack the tree, which could cause damage, and you're also going to leak some sap around the edges of the spile and lose that sap. And I've just got some drop lines going into the bucket. And that is the sign of a full bucket. Now these larger trees, this is a 4-tapper, they produce a lot. They usually take a little bit longer to start producing, but once they do, they really put off more sap in a season than any of the littler ones. But yeah. Better collect it before I waste any more sap. Welcome to the sugar house. So I'm going to give you a brief description of what's going on, and then I'll show you my first step that I typically do. So we've got a 24 by 24 stainless pan. I've got a large aluminum pot with a turkey fryer as a preheater. Television, that was definitely an added bonus. So the first thing I typically do is I will test the sap and the sugar content. Not always, but sometimes. So that is a test cup, and that is a sap hydrometer, and that is a squirrel deterrent. Alright, so let me grab some sap and see what we got going on here. Right. So what this does is it tests the sugar content. I'll move that a little bit closer. It really doesn't matter, but you know, it gives me an idea of what to expect when I'm finishing the product. And it's running fairly low. It's at about just over a 1.5%. It is getting towards the end of the year, so the sugar content typically will go down, but anyway, that is the first step. This is the setup I've got just for pre-straining the sap before it goes into the main pan or the preheater. It's just a cheesecloth, and I believe it's like a sink colander or some strainer, but that takes care of any little debris that might get into the sap before it gets cooked. I've got 5 gallons of sap in the front pan and 5 gallons in the preheater on the back. So it's time to start the fire. And I will say that I was a Boy Scout and I do have the ability to start it with a match, but so this is just a little bit faster. Got a boil going, and to keep it going, the key to that is going to be good wood. Right now I'm using some dry pine that's been seasoned all summer. It's cut up about the thickness of my wrist. You don't want to go much thicker on a small stove like this, otherwise it won't boil as fast. So I've been keeping it going by feeding the fire just about every 10 minutes is what I've found works for this stove. And you want to keep the coals up pretty close to the bottom of the pan. That's going to increase your boil rates. And right now, with this setup, I can do about 4 gallons an hour, so it's not much. It is a small operation. Like I said, I've only got 24 taps, so it's just about all that I can do, though. This is just about keeping up with what I've got. I've boiled the last 4 nights in a row, so I couldn't really add more taps without upgrading my evaporator or spending a fortune on propane. But anyway, that's kind of the tip on how to keep a good boil. I want to take a minute to talk about the different grades and colors that you'll see here in maple syrup. There's 4 different grades in Vermont. You've got golden color, delicate taste, amber color, rich flavor, dark color, robust flavor, and very dark and strong flavor. That's typically just used for cooking. This is a sample jar from each of the batches that I've done so far. On the left, my first, and on the far right is my most recent. I don't grade because I don't sell the product, but if I did, I would say that the 2 small jars are the golden color, delicate taste. The 2 on the ends are probably amber color, rich flavor, and the darker jar is going to be a dark color, robust flavor. I'm not sure. Typically it progresses to darker as the season goes on, but it's obviously dependent on how long you boil and the sugar content of the trees. So yeah, that's what I've got so far. We got a good boil going right now, and it's getting pretty low. I like to keep it about 1.5 to 2 inches. Right now I think we're just under an inch. So I'm going to show you just the process of moving sap from the preheater into the main pan. I like to add just about a gallon or so at a time, just so I don't lose my boil. Now, it is hot sap that's going in, so it's going to be pretty close to the temperature of boiling water, but I'll generally do that about every 20 or 30 minutes. So I know the lighting's not great, but I ran out of split wood, so when that happens, I have to split some more from my stash pile out back. I've gone through probably half a quart already this season, and it's just because I'm burning the pine, and it burns real quick, so I gotta keep up with it and collect some more this summer. So it's getting pretty late, and I'm gonna call it a night. What I'm gonna do is a process known as flooding the pan. So I've already stocked up the wood stove, and you know, I've been at it for about 8 hours. I boiled off around 30 gallons. Still got another 30 gallons to go. So I'm going to pick that up tomorrow. But flooding the pan is essentially just filling it up beyond where I know that the wood in the firebox is not going to be able to evaporate that much. So basically it'll be cooking while I'm sleeping. I filled it up with some hardwood, so that typically burns a little bit longer than the pine that I'm used to. But we'll fill this up, and I've got at least 5 gallons or so in there. Actually, that was probably more like 7.5 gallons. So just for safe measures, I'll fill the rest of it. So by the time I wake up tomorrow, that's probably going to be about halfway where it's at now, and I can just not even worry about it because it's not going to do anything. So for now, I'm signing off. Good night. Welcome back. So this is what I've got left after the flooding of the pan last night. So it's down to about 1.5 inches. So I'm going to fire back up and continue on. So I want to talk about sugar sand. Before this starts boiling, you can see in the bottom there's some sediment. That is called sugar sand or niter. Basically it's just the minerals separating out from the sap when it gets above 200 degrees Fahrenheit. They begin to separate. That's all going to be filtered out, but yeah, that's probably the most frustrating part of filtering and bottling the final product, is getting all of that removed. Alright, we've reached the final stage where we're ready to filter and finish the product. So we've stopped the boil and I've let the fire die down. So we've only got about 2 gallons in here. So we're going to put it onto the turkey fryer and boil off the last gallon or so. So what we're going to do is filter it coming off of the pan, because there is some sugar sand in there still. And then we're going to filter again once we've boiled and finished the product. So I talked earlier about sugar sand, and this is what I'm talking about. As you can see on the filter, it's kind of clogging up. So what I do, I've got these pre-filters, which I wet with hot water, and I've got the felt filter that's also been wet. And that just makes it filter a little bit easier. However, this is starting to plug up. I've still got a little bit of syrup left in the pan, so I'm going to pull the first pre-filter, and it's just not really going very fast. And then I'll dump the liquid into the next one. So I've got 4 total. So as they clog, I just continue to dump into the filter that's not been clogged. And that kind of moves the process along. And these, you can kind of squeeze them out a little bit, but we're gonna filter this again once it's become syrup. So I just dumped the rest of the sap out of the pan. So it's just so I don't burn my pan, because there are some hot holes in. I'm just gonna fill it with water, and that'll keep the pan from burning. So we just started boiling, and it's starting to boil over a little bit. So what I use is cooking spray. It's canola oil, and it really helps. Just a little spray is all it takes, and it keeps it from foaming up. So it's been boiling for about 15 or 20 minutes, and we're getting down there. So I'm going to test it. So I did show you a sap hydrometer. This is a syrup hydrometer. What we want it to get to is 59 bricks, which is basically the sugar percentage. So I got my test cup, and I fill that, and we'll see where we're at with it. So it's floating we're at just about 55. So we don't have that much longer to go. I'm going to zoom in on that. And I'll show you. So we want to get to the red line, which is the hot test. So it's measured at 211 degrees. But yeah, that's pretty close. It should only have about another 5 or 10 minutes. All right, so we're on the final steps. So the hydrometer is reading just about 59. You can see it bobbing up, and it's staying right there. And it's going to evaporate a little bit more once I shut it off. So that's about all I want. Now there's 3 different types of ways that you can tell when it's syrup. Back in the olden days, before hydrometers, they did a sheet test, and you can see how it kind of clumps up, and it starts to form just a thicker consistency. Usually it'll drip off if it's still sat. So there's one way. The hydrometer, that's probably the most accurate. And then temperature, you want to get it up to about 219 or 7 degrees over the boiling point of water. So that's the third way, if you don't have a hydrometer. But I would recommend investing in that. It's a pretty good method of knowing that you're right on when it comes to the consistency. Because if you go under, it doesn't always keep as well. Sometimes you get mold in the jars. If you go over, it's going to be too thick. It's better to be over than under, but yeah, that's done. So I'm going to move on to the filtering process. So we're on to the final step. We're going to be filtering and canning it. So this is my setup. I've got 3 pre-filters and a felt filter going into a funnel. And so I'll set this into the pan and just filter the syrup through. Oh boy. And what this does is it removes any sugar sand, because every time the temperature goes above 200, it creates more. It separates more of the minerals. So this is just to get that and make sure you've got a clear product. Alright, so I'm almost full with my first quart. And what I'll do here is I'll just finish it. Now these jars have already been pre-sanitized, so I boil those. And also the syrup process, you should be canning it somewhere between 180 and 200, and that just ensures that that when you do bottle it, it kills any bacteria that may be left in the jar. So what I'll do, take the lid, twist it on, and we'll flip it, and that kills any bacteria on the lid. So that's pretty much it from start to finish. And as you can see, it's still pretty hot, but we've probably got we got a nice color. It's a little bit darker, but that's kind of expected later in the season. So I hope you all enjoyed, and yeah, we'll catch you next time. So we ended up with just under a gallon. It took about 60 gallons of sap and 15 hours of boiling. So the sugar content's definitely lower than it was in the beginning of the season. I hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you can appreciate the hard work the sugar makers do. Thanks for watching.